I'm doing well. Thank you for joining us.
My honor.
Well, tomorrow is an honor for you because you'll be inducted in the TCDLA Hall of Fame. And the purpose of this interview / tape is to preserve for posterity your thoughts and feelings and history as part of the oral history project of TCDLA. And we appreciate you doing it.
Well, I'm delighted to be a part of it.
Okay. Let's start with basics. You were born and raised in San Antonio, weren't you?
Absolutely wrong. No, actually, you're close, though. You get an honorable mention.
I appreciate that.
Now, I was born in Laredo. And then lived in San Antonio for a few years, and my dad was a salesman. So we moved first grade to Kansas City, Kansas. Second grade, Louisville, Kentucky, and then back in San Antonio, third grade. And that's where I stayed until I graduated from high school.
After you graduated from high school, you went to college at University of Houston, correct?
I did.
And when you finished that, that would have been 1970?
It was 1970, exactly.
Okay. Then you went to St. Mary's University?
No, actually, we're 4 years off. I got out of
high school
in 70, went to U of H in 1970 to 74, graduated from U of H, applied to the U of H Law School, got rejected. And that's important, I'll tell you in a second, but got rejected, but thankfully I was accepted at St. Mary's University School of Law. And I think it's always kind of fun that I got rejected at U of H because I've been teaching law school there for the last 18 years.
Let's go back to St. Mary's. When you graduated from St. Mary's, I believe you graduated with distinction, did you not?
I did.
And when you graduated, that would have been what, 1977?
1977, you're right on the money.
From there, you went to a very enlightening job, didn't you?
I was one of the most fortunate occurrences in my entire life, and certainly in my professional career.
And that was the Court of Criminal Appeal, correct?
Exactly. I applied for a briefing attorney position, and was so fortunate to be selected by Judge Wendell Odom to be his briefing attorney for the 1977-78 term.
When you finished working for Judge Odom, and of course you met a number of reprobates back in that
Indeed.
You were licensed in 1977 by the State Bar, correct?
I was.
And from Austin you went to Houston.
Austin, I went to Houston, and let me tell you a really funny story, but one that made so much sense, especially in retrospect. Judge Odom always called me Sport. He said, "Sport, when you leave me, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to be a criminal defense lawyer." And he said, "Where do you want to do that?" I said, "Houston." And he said, and I quote, he says, "I can call Racehorse Haynes or Percy, probably get you a job. But have you ever thought about being a prosecutor?" I said, "No, actually I haven't." He said, "Are you opposed to that?" I said, "No, I just really hadn't thought about it." He said, "Go to Houston, be a prosecutor," and he said, and I quote, "learn how to fuck up on the state's time." And what he was telling me was it's serious business to represent a citizen or a non-citizen in a criminal court. And go learn how to try a lawsuit before you attempt to do it and unintentionally inflict pain on a client.
And that's what you did, right?
That's exactly what I did. Best advice I ever got.
What, you were at the DA's office in Harris County as an assistant DA for what, 3 years?
3 years. I was hired in 1978 by Carol Vance, and then I resigned in 1981. I gave him a 3-year commitment, and I stayed 3 years and a day.
And from there, you went to the Federal Public Defender's Office in Houston.
I did. Again, a lucky, serendipitous situation. Roland Dolan was the Federal Public Defender, and he had been a pretty high muckety-muck assistant DA in the District Attorney's Office. And he was looking for someone with a lot of trial experience and someone who preferably had been a law clerk before. And so, in fact, Rusty Harden at the time was a chief. He said, "You need to talk to Secrest. That's what you need," because he knew I was getting ready to leave or wanted to leave. So Roland hired me as an assistant federal public defender in 1981.
Would you spend 3 years there?
I
2.5
spent 2. He asked me for a 3-year commitment. I said, I'll give you 2. I might stay longer, but I was anxious to go into private practice, but I did it for 2 years.
So at the end of the 2-year period of time, you went into private practice, right?
I did.
And who did you start practicing with when you started?
Well, I was solo, but I went down to a building where there were several prominent criminal defense lawyers, and I was able to sublet a piece of real estate, and that was Randy Schaefer, Don Lambright, Wendell Odom, and I leased some space and went out on my own. And then, I don't know, maybe a year and a half, 2 years later, there was a really fine lawyer by the name of Ken Sparks, who had been a chief prosecutor for years and had gone out into private practice. Ken and I then formed a partnership, and we practiced together for about 3 or 4 years.
You've been in private practice ever since, correct?
Ever since. That's right, Dave.
And you got to practice with one of the finest ex-state court prosecutors in Harris County for, what, 20 years or so?
Oh, more than 20 years. You're referencing my dear friend, my mentor, Bob Bennett. I hasten to add the real Bob Bennett, Robert C. Bennett. And Bobby Bennett had been a world-class prosecutor. He was involved in the Little Paulus case, and the prosecution of Dr. John Hill, that trilogy of cases. And I had certainly known of Bob by his reputation. And when I was an assistant federal public defender, we had a case, a very interesting case, that we ultimately tried, and I had the court-appointed defendant, and Bobby and David Berg had the retained clients, and that's how I built a beautiful relationship with Bobby Bennett.
Peach of a guy, isn't he?
Wonderful.
And I'm sure he taught you quite a bit.
He taught me a whole lot, especially, I think, just human nature, what it takes to be a criminal defense lawyer, the obligation to the client, obligation to the profession, and of course his forensic skills were unmatched.
Talk about some of the things that you've achieved and accomplished. You are board certified in criminal law, are you not?
I am.
And you got that certification, as quickly as it was available.
Exactly. I can't tell you exactly when it was, but it was, I guess, 5 years. I think it was 5 years. You had to have 5 years of experience, I think. So, give or take, it was probably about 1982. And then I've been, board certified ever since. And then I also have become board certified in appellate law.
Right. Now, that board certification in appellate law is a recent creation of TBLS.
Exactly.
But you served TBLS with distinction. You were on, the Criminal Law Examination Commission?
I was on that actually with you for many years, and then I believe 1 year I was the chairman of that commission.
And that's the great drafting and grading of the examinations for people that want to become board certified in criminal law.
Exactly.
Okay, super. Now, you mentioned earlier that you've been, you taught at the University of Houston School of Law, and I think you've done that, continuously since 1991?
Yeah, well, off and on a little bit, but well over 20 years. I've taught, I started teaching in South Texas 1 year where I taught criminal procedure, and then thereafter I started teaching at U of H, and I taught a seminar with Justice Murray Cohen on Texas criminal appellate law. And then for several years, George Murphy and I did a tag team, kind of a moot court mock trial deal for the students, and we did that for several years, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a great experience, but I kind of wanted to get into the case law a little bit more, so I kind of schemed and convinced the law school that they didn't have a Texas criminal procedure class. And of course, when we went to law school, we took criminal procedure, which is really constitutional law. I wanted to cover those bases, but I also wanted to emphasize the Code of Criminal Procedure. So they went for it, and I've been teaching that class off and on, mainly on for about 20 years.
Okay. Now, you've also, you were appointed by Governor Bush to the Governor's Ad Hoc Committee to revise the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure back in the mid-90s.
We were, and that absolutely went nowhere. But I do have a very nice picture with the governor. But actually, the best part of that, substantively, it was a 0. But the best part of that was the various folks that were on that committee, and of course, Professor Dix and Judge Cochran before she was a jurist, and you and several other folks, and so that was good, and it was a little bit different because, of course, there were prosecutors, not only just defense lawyers, the law professors, and regrettably, some members of the Senate or House of Representatives had to be on board, so it didn't really go anywhere. But there was an earnest effort made to do a comprehensive review of the code. But like I say, it didn't go anywhere.
Do you think maybe in the benefit of hindsight that was a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I think it's good to be open-minded and you know, think outside the box. No, I think it was fine. It's just that substantively it didn't go anywhere, and there were a lot of different ideas and thoughts about things that ought to be in the code that were not, and maybe some things that ought to be ripped out of it. But again, it really didn't go anywhere, but it was an interesting experience, sure.
Now, you have a reputation within the legal community of being a lawyer's lawyer. And I say that with very seriously, as you know, despite the fact that we tease each other all the time about a lot of things.
Right.
But you are very cerebral, and you've been authoring O'Connor's Criminal Codes Plus from, I think, 1996 or 1997 to current.
That's right. That's right.
And so you stay up on the law.
I sure
on
try.
a continuous basis.
I sure try to. It's not easy. As I like to say, the law changes every Wednesday when the Court of Criminal Appeals issues its new edicts. Yeah, I try to stay on top of that, as well as the Court of Appeals decisions. And that's been kind of a labor of love. It's been a really wonderful project.
You've also been involved with TCDLA.
I have, sure.
You've taught at the Tim Evans College in Huntsville any number of times?
Several times. I went up there and really enjoyed that program. A couple of times I was asked to do a demonstration on cross-examination, opening statement, that kind of thing. I think it's a marvelous program, and it's something, you know, I believe you attended, as I have, the National College of Criminal Defense.
NCDC.
Yeah, and that was a great experience. That I believe Emmett Cobbin had just become the president of that when I attended. When my first few months at the Federal Public Defender's Office, Roland insisted that we attend, and I am so glad that I went. And it was easy because it was at U of H. So I was able to go and do it and then come home at night and work on my cases. But on maybe a smaller level, I think that's what the Huntsville program has aspired to be, and I think it's marvelous.
You've also spoken any number of times through the years at TCDLA and or CDLP seminars too. And in fact, in 1998, and I'm going to talk to you about this case, this organization gave you the Percy Foreman Lawyer of the Year for your incredible work representing Carla Faye Tucker in the post-conviction era, keeping her alive from the late 1980s until February 3rd, 1998.
Wasn't long enough.
No, and you actually witnessed that execution, didn't you?
I did.
Talk to us a little bit about Carla, because it's got to be one of the most significant cases in your career.
Think I'm getting goosebumps. I think I was, you know, obviously trying to think about a few cases that I might want to talk a little bit about. That has to be probably top of the list. That case, I was appointed, it was Judge Likas, who was the presiding judge, and never really got along with her. But for some reason, she appointed me to do the appeal. And so I got involved with that actually filing a motion for new trial. So it was early on, within 30 days of her conviction. It was the metamorphosis was incredible. Her trial attorneys had told me the way she presented herself when they first got appointed after her arrest. And of course, she was addicted to heroin at the age of 10 and had that kind of background. But they talked about, how, street angry she was. And then by the time they finally got to trial, of course, she had dried out and she had blossomed. And of course, by the time I got the case, she was a different person than she was at the time of the offense. And then, of course, years and years later, just before they killed her, she had fully blossomed, and she had become the flower that I think was always there. But that was a special case. But to answer your question, the bottom line is we were very close and had a nice relationship, and you can understand because you've been there yourself many times. It was I who had to reach out to her every time we lost, and we lost a lot of times, and there was a lot of appellate warfare going on, and inevitably, David, every time I would get her on the phone or see her eyeball to eyeball and tell her that we had not prevailed, the first thing out of her mouth was, "How are you doing? How are you handling it?" So she was really very caring and compassionate. It wasn't bullshit. It wasn't a facade. It was real. And so when the inevitability came, they get 5 or 6 folks to be witnesses, and she told me, "I want you to be a witness." One, I don't think there's any way I could have said no had I didn't want to do it, but I actually wanted to be with her. It wasn't a problem. I said, "Sure, I'll be glad. I'll be honored. I'll be privileged to be with you." And I will tell you, as much as I hate the system in that regard, people at back then, TDC, absolutely humane. They had separated the witnesses for the victims and the witnesses for the offender, and they had taken us to separate, kind of drop houses, but basically homes that various clergy people were there with food. It was kind of like a wake, and these people were really caring. I'm not a religious person, but I did find it helpful to have those folks there, and it was really very loving. And when the van came and got us and took us to the unit, everybody treated us with great respect. As you will recall, she had a lot of support in the prison amongst the staff. And as you know, we had wardens who did not want her to die. And so everybody treated us with the utmost courtesy and respect. But they had it down like a machine. They brought us over there. They put us in a room. They said, "When we tell you to come immediately." And I think what they were trying to do was segregate us from the victim witnesses so there'd be no interaction. And our person came to the door and said, "Come down, please." It was like that. We got up, we walked, we go down a hallway. It was kind of dark. And then they took us into a room, immediately closed the door, and immediately a curtain opened. And there she is right in front of us, literally about as far as you're from me. And the curtain opens up, and she's on a gurney strapped down with tubes. And they don't fart around. Within 20 or 30 seconds, they go through that mumbo jumbo, "Do you have any last words to say," or whatever. Carla looked right at us, told us she loved us, was very caring toward the victims, apologized for her conduct, and then they killed her. And then they closed the curtain and asked us, "Please come." and got us out of there about as fast as they got us in there. But I mean, they treated us with great respect. I saw several guards and majors with tears in their eyes. And then, as you know, because you were with us, then we went to Larry King show. Everything was set up there in the parking lot area right outside the prison. And then, but it was kind of a zoo at the time. It was a big deal. I think these days nobody shows up, or very few people, but that was a media service.
She was the first female that had been executed in the state in over 100 years.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
How long do you think it took you to recover from that day, the day of Carla's death at the hands of the state?
Well, let me say this. I'm going to maybe shock you and say it didn't take me that long, and the reason was because obviously we saw it coming. It wasn't like a deal you get a phone call, somebody just got killed in a car wreck or something. I mean, we knew it was coming. And because she was so loving and so caring and had incredible support, even from, as you will remember, the prosecutors who prosecuted the co-defendant, the detective who broke the case, he didn't want her to die. So she had this groundswell of support, and various politicians and religious leaders. But it took me several years. I still handled death penalty cases after that, but quite frankly, I never ever got as close to a client. Certainly a death penalty case that I got close to her, because she was such a sweet human being, and it was such a gross waste of life. She didn't need to die. She could have stayed in prison forever. She could have done some great things in prison, but politics were not what they needed to be. As you know, Governor Bush was getting ready to run for president, and there's no way he could have faded that heat, even though that would have been the right thing to do.
Let me change gears from that case, which obviously, although you did great work and maybe knew what was happening, still disappointment.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about, you could pick out one case that you consider to be your personal greatest victory. Talk to us about that, whatever one it is.
I would think it was a case, a young woman by the name of Yvonne Rodriguez. She was accused of strangling her infant son and baby Ramiro and throwing the baby in the Houston Bayou. And she had been picked up on videotape in the downtown mall with baby Ramiro in the baby cart, push cart, and then she went to the restroom and later on she contended that the baby had been taken from her while she had used the restroom. Well, the videotape showed that wasn't the case. And the truth in fact, she had left the area and had strangled her baby with a crucifix and threw the baby in the bayou. Yvonne was very, very ill, without doubt, and she was hyper-religious. And she was convinced that her baby was possessed by a demon. And it's kind of I'll make it quick, kind of interesting story. I was living in the penthouse of the Rice Hotel at the time. I'll never forget it. I get my paper at the door, get a cup of coffee, and the front page of the Chronicle has this Houston scuba diver coming out of the bayou with slime and crap all over her, face mask, looking for the dead baby. And with caption, woman charged capital murder or something. I remember saying to myself, I said, boy, this girl needs a real lawyer. Only in jest. And so I go to my office, And about 5 minutes after I got there, the secretary says, Mary's on the phone. I said, Mary, it's Judge Cosper's coordinator. And I said, we don't have anything in Judge Cosper's court. So anyway, so Mary got on the phone. Mary, how are you doing? Fine. We chatted for a moment. She said, you familiar with that case? Yeah, I just saw it on the newspaper. She said, well, it's in our court, and Judge Cosper wants you to represent her. I said, well, Mary, I'd like to, but I'm really busy at the time. I got a bunch of stuff in federal court. So anyhow, I begged off and said, have a nice day. So about 30 seconds later, my secretary says, Judge Cosper on the phone. Oh, geez. So anyhow, I took the case, and I'm so glad I did. This woman was severely mentally ill. Her family had a history of mental illness. I found a priest who told me that she talked about seeing floating metal balls. And we found a woman came forward who saw her chanting, heard her chanting kind of animal sounds while in a Walgreens. So there was all kind of independent evidence to really demonstrate that she really was insane. And there I saw a metamorphosis, because she was just crazy as a loon. And then over time, she kind of came out of a lot of that once she was kind of put on medication. But anyhow, they offered 40 to do on that. It was capital murder. They weren't seeking the death penalty. They offered 40, and we tried it. And it was I think strategically something that really helped me, and much to the credit of Judge Cosper. I told her, I said, I'll take this case, but I said, I don't care if I get paid anything, but I need money I want experts. She said, you can have whatever you need. And I talked her into doing a motion to suppress ahead of the trial by about a month, which normally doesn't happen. And I filed a motion to suppress, arguing that she's insane and it couldn't be voluntary. I knew I was going to lose that. And actually I didn't want to win it, because the case was won on the video. I subpoenaed everybody that had a name in the offense report, took their deposition during the motion to suppress for about 2 days. And that helped immensely. And anyway, we tried the case. We put on several expert witnesses, and the jury was out 5 days and found her not guilty by reason of insanity. So that's probably, to me, maybe the most significant lawyering I've ever done. Although, I've handled death penalty cases. Knock on wood, I've never lost a death penalty case at trial to the death penalty. We've got life sentence, lesser included. But that to me was a wonderful case. It's very difficult, as you know, to get a not guilty by reason of insanity. And this woman was so sick and so ill, and to this day she still is in a mental institution.
Wow. Let me, in 2007, Harris County bestowed upon you an award where it was the Lawyer of the Year, correct?
It's true.
That's kind of a decade after TCDLA gave you the equivalent of TCDLA's award.
Right.
And then in 2016, Harris County, the Harris County Criminal Defense Lawyers Association bestowed upon you the Richard Racehorse Haynes Lifetime Achievement Award.
I was very honored.
And tomorrow, you're going to be inducted into the TCDLA Hall of Fame. All of that is beautiful, but let me just say, you are remaining active in your practice.
I am.
And what you're currently serving as the chair of the Harris County Public Defenders Board?
That's exactly right. Forever in Harris County, we did not have a public defender. The private bar did the court-appointed work. And that's not, I'm not totally against that. I mean, I've said it before, I think the best lawyering I've done as a lawyer has been in cases where I've been court appointed. But that being said, I think an institutional public defender is essential, especially in a big city, and the private bar just can't handle it all. And so finally they woke up from a deep nap and decided to get smart and put together a public defender. And how they started, David, the various bar associations nominated someone to be a member of the board. And what our initial function was to send out notices and go through resumes and conduct interviews. And we got something like 130 applicants. And then we narrowed it down to 8 or 9 people. And then we interviewed them all in one day, and then ultimately took a vote. We recommended Alex Bunnan. But since that time, I've stayed on the board, and I was vice chair, now I'm the chairman. I don't know how long I'm going to do that, but the PD's office has done great work. Unsurprising, they've got the best acquittal rate. They win more cases on appeal than the private bar. But more important, they're an adjunct for the private bar. And so now they're putting together a library of transcripts of expert witness testimony. They have several closets of clothes. So if you represent someone who needs a suit for court, you can get it. They put on first class CLE, and they invite the private bar. So initially, as you can understand, it was somewhat antagonistic because the private bar saw the public defenders taking, paycheck out of their wallet. Now it's far more collaborative, and as in most systems, the public defender, I think, takes a maximum 25-30% of the cases anyway, so there's still a lot of work for the private bar. So it's a win-win.
What are your plans for the future?
Like everybody else, I want to be relevant. I want to be able to contribute. But the best thing ever happened to me in my life, as you well know, is I found the love of my life, and late in life got married. And I want to spend quality time with my bride. So in order to do that, I'm going to try to cut back. I'm going to be active in the practice of law. I'm going to handle less cases. I think also I probably want to try to keep teaching. I really enjoy that. It keeps me current. I get to meet the next crop of gladiators. And I think it's a contribution that I can make that's probably a pretty good one. But quite frankly, I'm tired of the David Botsford days of 60, 70-hour work weeks. I think hopefully most of that is behind me until the next trial setting.
Well, you're a young man. You're only 68.
That's true. 67, please.
I apologize.
Yeah.
Right, you're 67.
Yeah.
Right, because I'm only 66. I'm the youngster in the group.
You're the youngster.
There you go. Okay. Well, let me just throw out the ball for one last thing. If you wanted to tell youngsters, the young gladiators that are coming up, anything at all, go ahead and tell them. Give them your best advice, because they're the ones that are probably going to be watching this.
Well, I think you got to really want to do this kind of work. It's not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. But Mike Ramsey, a great lawyer, once said that being a criminal defense lawyer is a license to tell the government to go to hell. And I think that really sums it up, because you're the only person frequently that can effectively stand between them and the state. And as you well know, sometimes the state is overbearing, sometimes the state doesn't have it right, sometimes the state knows it doesn't have it right and still comes at you. And if you're going to go into this line of work, you have to be dedicated and want to do it. This is not the way to make money. You can make some serious money, but if you really want to make a whole bunch of money, go be a tort lawyer, patent lawyer, or whatever. But I think the essential thing to really appreciate and to understand when you're representing the citizen accused is really it's an honor and a privilege. I mean, think about what this concept is. You are representing them. You are standing in for them. They're not capable. In a legal sense, they're inept, even though they might be very bright. But they are inept. They cannot defend themselves. So you are standing in between them and literally standing in their shoes. And you are making their arguments. You are strategically making decisions that hopefully will win the day or at least mitigate the pain. and never lose sight of that. Too often, I think we think in terms of, what big case do we have? What kind of money can we make? What kind of pub can we get? And all those things are, kind of icing on the cake. But the actual cake is understanding how noble a cause and how important an obligation to stand between your client and the state. And literally, when they come after your client, they're coming after you. And if you can get yourself in that mindset, and the last thing I want to say, don't be me, for God's sakes. Be yourself. Be the best advocate you can, but be yourself, because the jury is not going to accept you playing the role of David Botsford. The jury hopefully will accept you being yourself. That's what's most important.
Anything else you want to say, Mac?
No, I just want to. I want to sincerely thank the members of TCDLA and of course the organization. I was so flattered when I was told that I had been inducted, and especially look at the lineage of those other lawyers throughout the state, throughout time, that have been inducted. It's really the highlight of my career, and certainly the finest honor that I've ever received in my life, and for that I thank you very much.
Well, it's the board of directors that approved that nomination by the awards committee, and the awards committee consists of entirely members of the board of directors, past presidents, and Hall of Fame members. They chose wisely, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.